Jason, want to start us off?
That was 2 seconds?
3.5, actually.
Whoa! I only gave you 2. You took 1.5 too many.
You gave me an inch, I'll take an inch and a half.
Apparently. Cool. Welcome to the From the North podcast, a Masonic podcast of 3 Master Masons talking about life, lodge, and being better men. Today we have myself, Jason Lee. I am currently Senior Deacon of Harmony Lodge number 21.
And I am AC Ransom. I'm currently Junior Deacon of Harmony Lodge number 21. And
I'm Gary Roberts. And I'm not going to make anything up this time. I'm current Junior Warden of Harmony Lodge number 21.
And the most animated, enthused sounding of us all.
I applaud you for your restraint.
He's so stoic.
Boy, do I have you guys buffaloed.
Yeah, so this week we don't really have a plan. I mean, do we want to figure out our plan right now?
I had 2 plans.
Oh, okay,
Either
cool.
the book, if we were prepared for it, or like a different version of a plan that we had a while back but didn't do.
What was our different version of our plan?
So the different version of the plan would be we just talk about whichever symbol has impacted us the most.
Oh!
That we find that we reflect on or that has changed our behavior or mindset the most.
Yeah, because
which is not hard to spitball about. So.
Well, I think we all researched a little bit, at least, into part of like our podcast symbols. Yeah. Like I did from the north. What did you do? Did you do?
I don't remember what I was assigned. Probably the circumpunct or the
trowel.
Trowel, thank you.
And I don't remember what mine was either.
But I figured instead of that, we'll just because the symbols have impacted our lives. Guarantee there's times when we've thought of oh yeah, that symbol, I should apply this to this part of my life. So I think we just look back and reflect and talk about whichever one has impacted us the most.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Maybe this hasn't necessarily impacted me the most, but I read somewhere, so I always assumed, and we can cut this out if we need to, if this is too. I always assumed that the G stood for God, right? That was the point. But that's very English language centered, and only in the last, however recently. And so then I was like, maybe it's geometry, right? Because that's part of the root of how so much of our stuff comes from. But what does the G stand for? Or is it just literally a symbol?
We might have to cut out parts of this. No, actually, no. You can tell people that it either stands for it's actually both.
Oh,
okay. That it's geometry and God, and it is mostly an American thing.
I was going to say, that's the thing that I've learned. It is a very American thing because in other lodges outside the United States, the G is not a prominent symbol in lodge like it is here in the United States.
Go look at the Grand Lodge of England. No G.
Interesting. See, and that clears up a lot because that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like,
this is very current era type of.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh, if the G, okay, it should stand for God. That's what I think I'd even been told that that's what it stood for, and then I was like, wait a second, that works for me as an English speaker, but pick any other language, that's not going to work. And so then I was like, well, what does it actually stand for? That makes sense though, that it's just an American thing.
Yeah, I think there's a couple more countries besides us that have it, but it really is just mostly us.
Interesting.
Well, and like all symbols in Freemasonry, there isn't a specific meaning for each symbol for everybody. Everything has multiple meanings. Everything has multiple things you can put on it, etc.
Layers.
So there's layers within layers. I mean, I was always told. I always figured, just like you, when I was, growing up and heard about Freemasonry from the outside, the G was God. And now that I've been in and learned more, that really as we go through the Fellowcraft degree, we learn that it's more about this and also that. And but as I start to look at other symbols, it expands from there. One thing that I was told that wasn't lodge, and to me, I mean, I remember hearing my first lecture as right after I was initiated, going through that lecture, and all this information was coming at you in a fire hose, and all of it was very symbolic because they were walking you around the lodge and showing you these different parts of the lodge and giving you a very brief explanation as to what they were and what their purpose was. So you had to go dig, and you had to find your own purpose in the symbols of those devices. And I think that's part of one thing that I've enjoyed about Freemasonry is for at some point in time in my life, at any given time, that symbol means more to me than maybe the other ones do.
Sure.
And I start looking into that symbol, what its meaning was, what past Masons said it was, what they lectured on it, what they thought it was, and then I try to incorporate what I learned from them into what I feel it is for me.
Totally.
So, and that's the thing. I mean, Freemasonry's got a boatload of symbols, but Freemasonry isn't the only thing that has that. There are symbols all over the place in any organization that has ritual as its base.
Well, the great thing about Freemasonry is you learn how to look at a symbol, and like you get used to being able to to read into it and try and infer what it means, so you can look at more that's not in here and still learn from it.
Rather than just taking it all at face value.
Yeah,
totally.
yeah, exactly.
And again, like kind of speaking about some stuff we've talked in the past, like a lot of the Masonic journey is a personal journey. And so again, like, yeah, we can have a meaning for G or for whatever, but at the end of the day, a symbol only means something if it means something to you.
Right.
And so like the more effort we put into like understanding that and applying whatever symbol we're looking at into our lives, like the more meaning it does have. Because even letters are still just symbols, right? Like they're symbols of sounds. But yeah, no, so that was just a question I had always had.
Question.
Well, that's why Freemasonry is so appealing to me, is that we don't say, this is what it is, right, and you have to believe that the G is only for God, and that's all it can be.
Totally.
You know, there are other religions or other organizations that say that is what it is, and it can only be that. Freemasonry, it is what you need it to be at that time for you.
At the same time, though, I feel like now
G could be girls for me.
Fair point.
Or good grief.
But at the same time, like I do feel, I want to make sure I say this in not a horrible way. I do feel like now that I am a Master Mason, in a lot of ways, the EA and FC degree are not meaningless, but like, kind of. You know
they
what
are
I mean?
definitely, I would say, considering the amount of ritual and stuff thrown at you, the first two they almost feel kind of more empty.
Yeah.
Compared to the quantity you get from the others.
Well,
still good stuff, and still like very important to work your way through that. But yeah, like it's definitely not as big of a deal as when you first go through it.
Also, like when I became an EA, my objective was I want to be a Master Mason, and like obviously, like that should be like your objective, right? Is to become a Master Mason for sure. You shouldn't want to be an EA forever, obviously. But I wanted to get there as quickly as I could. And now that I am a Master Mason, having gotten there pretty much as quickly as possible, I kind of regret that. I kind of regret that I didn't spend a serious amount of time in the EA degree, because now I'm trying to learn MM stuff, Master Mason stuff, and I've but glossed over the lessons of the EA and the FC. And I think part of that, again, like I think it's natural to become an EA and be like, all right, I want to go. I want to just get there. I want to be there now. I think that's natural. And so I think that now that I've done that and realized that it's probably not the greatest thing, I feel like there almost should be like a minimum wait time before you go on to other degrees. And I know in other jurisdictions that is the case.
A lot of them have wait times and things you have to do.
Exactly.
Like write a paper, do a service project, like prove that you're being affected. I think we should enforce that in America.
Well, and isn't that reinforced in the MM degree?
What do you mean?
A little bit. That wanting to become a Master Mason before you're ready?
Yeah.
That's true. That is treated upon.
Totally. And like, again, but like, that was information.
But at that point, you're hearing that message too late.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's true. What I was just going to say. And that's the point I'm making, is that I think it's natural. You get a new candidate, they're excited about it, they get into the EA. Of course they want to go to the MM as soon as possible, and given the ability, or given the leeway to do that, they'll do what I did, generally speaking. Not everybody, but generally speaking. You being like one of the exceptions, AC.
One of the rare exceptions.
But like, I think that's pretty normal, and so I think you need to put systems in place, not to discourage you from getting to a Master Mason, but to ensure you're taking your time to get there and learning the lessons that are necessary.
Well, and I think if we were better as Masons about mentoring these entered apprentices and FCs through, they wouldn't be in such a rush to get to the MM. I mean, yeah, there are benefits to being an MM because you can now vote and you get to help
and that's what
guard the Westgate and that kind of stuff, and you get the low readership roles
and help in the rituals, so you're more involved.
Yeah, you're more involved, but I mean, you could still be somewhat involved as an EA because you get to help in the work. You're mentored by an MM. But I think if we took a better approach at, and I've seen other jurisdictions do this, so that where there are classes that are given to candidates before they even go through the first degree. So they know what's kind of expected of them once they become an EA. They know what's in store. But then after they become an AA, there's a series of classes to teach them the working tools that they've been given.
Right.
And there's also a concerted effort to integrate them into the workings of the lodge so that they're working and learning the craft, yet not having to yet have all the responsibility of being an MM.
And again, like going back, when I was in that moment, I was very happy that we did like the Grandmaster's class. I was very happy about it. And I was very happy, and I would love for those classes to continue because I want to see people do it expertly, right? I want to see people do the ritual expertly. But my time as an FC was minutes, right? I measured it in minutes, not in even hours, to be honest.
Right, yep.
And you lose something. Like, in my brain, not because I want it to be this way, but in my brain, I care less about the stuff in the FC lectures, in the FC
that's what you were saying before, because you didn't have much time to spend on it. Gotcha.
Totally. I care about it less. And I primarily focus on EAs, not because I've just noticed this. This is just a phenomenon I've noticed in my own behavior, is that I look at EA stuff and then I'll look at MM stuff. And I don't really look at other things because those are the two I spend the most time in. And to be honest, I'm still working. I know you're not supposed to just master EA and you never have to go back to like the lessons you learned there. Like it's a lifelong thing. But I still am like trying to apply those things from my freaking EA. And I don't know, like all I'm saying is like from this experience has taught me that patience is very important. And I don't think I wasn't quote unquote ready, but I do wish I would have spent more time in the preceding degrees to like gain more knowledge of those degrees.
So having stated that, and I agree with what you stated because you and I had very, very similar paths, and unaffected by the influence of AC. But but
we both shift.
We had to get in our defensive positions here, just in case we get struck by lightning or something. But so having done that, and we've talked about how we would not go through a Grandmaster's class again, through a one-day course, knowing what we know now, and we wouldn't do that again. So I have a hypothetical question for you, and I'm not saying this to say that our past Grandmasters are bad. I know other reasons why they hold these courses and these classes, and they're varied and far.
Cut that part out.
I'm gonna cut that. It's okay. Like, hey, actually, I'll leave it in there. But realistically, it is a part of it because we get dues quicker, and then also a big part of it is there's not a lot of Masons who can do the ritual really well, and so it's very convenient.
But both of those are connected. I'm gonna let Gary finish.
And so, anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Don't let me forget about that.
Right. So
your
various reasons,
some
of which AC just mentioned.
I might slice it out.
Yeah, I would cut that out.
But parts and pieces in there. I'm fine with it being in there. I mean, it's a good thing. But
cut out me saying cut it out.
There's all these blank spots.
But like, you usually don't notice the blanks. Like, if you cut them out, like...
Yeah.
Anyways, keep going. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Gary. We are so good at going off track.
It's all good.
Good, go ahead.
Okay, so all things being said and done, someday you're sitting in the Grandmaster's chair. Would you, personally, You have the ability to do it by our Grand Lodge bylaws. It states that if 5 lodges petition the Grand Master, he can.
Not that he has to.
Not that he has to. Can do a Grand Master's class. If you got requests from 5 lodges, would you?
I already have my answer before you even finished the question. I knew what my answer was.
I think there's caveats to it, because what I would want is, and I'll never be Grandmaster, but if I were, what I would want is to establish a precedent of like, I would take it as my objective to be like, this is how Freemasonry should be going forward, right? Like, I should be setting up my successor to follow in kind of a similar path, and I would hope that my predecessor would have set me up to follow in his path. So I personally, if that was the case, if we were moving to my idealized version of Freemasonry, I would do everything I could to make sure it kept going in that direction. And again, my idealized version is that when you're a candidate and when you're an EA, you take the time to learn what that actually means. You take the time to respect what that actually means, and you move on once you've demonstrated to yourself and to God that you are ready to move on. And then the Freemasonry organization just provides metrics or just provides criteria, right, to help you make that decision. So, for example, one of the criteria could be, obviously it's memorizing certain things. That is a criteria, and that's a symbol to you once you complete that you are ready to move on. But I don't think that should be the only criteria that you are given as you're ready to move on. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So if the winds were currently blowing in that direction, if my predecessor was already setting that up, if the person after me was of a similar mind, then yeah, I would absolutely push for that. But I wouldn't just abandon a tradition just because I want to see it done a certain way. I would want to make sure that the organization wants that to happen, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're Grandmaster, you're not Grandmaster because you want to put your version of Freemasonry out there. You're there because you want to put out the version that everybody's comfortable with, you're trying to lead the whole ship, not just what you want. So that would be my thing is, if there was a growing sentiment of like, yeah, let's make this mean something more, then I would push everything I could behind that because I also believe that. But if it was a no, that's not how we want Utah Masonry to go, I would probably try to take some other avenues, to start showing people that like, yeah, this is the avenue we want to go, but that may or may not entail, making candidates wait or making EA people wait or whatever. I think it just depends on what Utah is like at that point, if that makes sense. Right. I know that's a kind of a crappy answer.
Right.
Well, that's a very good answer.
I think, yeah, you have quite a, well, the thing is, movement up a Grand Lodge line is very, very regular here in Utah. So once you become a junior warden, essentially 4 years from then, you will be the Grand Master. I mean, I've not seen a case where that has not happened. Just in my studies, I mean, I've only been a MM for a little over a year, so I've only seen it happen once. But that's the progression works. So you have influence in Grand Lodge for 4 years because you're going to be the junior warden, you're going to be the senior warden, you're going to be the deputy Grand Master for a while, for a year, and then you have your year. So you essentially have 4 years to prepare. Unlike our local lodges where I could be junior warden for a year. Next year, I might not be anything. I could just be on the sideline because our line doesn't stay solid for some reasons or another. We didn't get the memorization work done. We didn't. But Grand Lodge, that tends to be the case that there's that once you're in the pillar line, you will progress up that. So you have 4 years of influence there. There are some things that you could do, some influence you could have in those 4 years. And maybe the direction is that we're still doing Grandmaster's class, but maybe it's the junior warden. And I would say this way: you have 4 years to plan your year, but you can influence that year 4 years in advance. And you could say, you know what, my year, I'm hoping to not have to do a Grandmaster's class. And what I'm going to do in my years, I'm going to push education. I'm going to push ritual practice. I'm going to push that districts work well together. If they don't have enough members to do parts, to pull members from neighboring lodges to help them do the degrees, which we've had some success doing that here in northern Utah. Mm-hmm. My EA degree was a mix of brothers from 3 different lodges. And it was done very well. And at the time, I didn't know that they were from 4 different lodges. And but we've also had other degrees that we've been able to do fully with Harmony Lodge, which is the ultimate goal, which I think is great. And the ritual has gone really well when it was a mix of brothers from multiple lodges and a mix of brothers and not a mix of brothers. We've done some really good degrees. So the goal would be for me to do what I can in the areas that I have influence to help strengthen that, so that there isn't a request in my year as Grandmaster. And I'm like you, I'll never sit in that chair, but you can always think about what if. Now, what would AC do?
Someday, I'm going to replay those clips where you both say you're not going to be Grandmasters when you're Grandmasters. Like, remember the time you said this? I'm going to play it.
And then I'll punch you.
And probably get kicked out.
Yeah, they'll get kicked out.
So you're welcome.
Masonic charges up against the Grandmaster that day. Woohoo! I want to be there for that trial.
What's your answer, though?
You both bring up good points of... so my immediate reaction would be no Grandmaster class. But then you both bring up a good point of... there would be a way to be gentler and nicer about it and prepare things and get it ready. And so I think that I would do that same thing of get things ready to not have one and then make it easy, or easier at least, like provide all the help that the lodges need, so that when you tell them we're not doing a Grandmaster's class, we're going to work as like a team of Utah Masons to get the ritual done. So that way, instead of just saying, no, it won't be done, go and figure it out, like already have a plan and a system and some preparation in place, to tell them, no, we're not doing one, but we're going to help, but they already have like the help that they need to do the MM at their own lodge, and then and then I think that would go over well. I think Masons would be like, some might be upset because we've always done a Grandmaster's class or something, but I think once they realize that, this has been really awesome to mix and mingle with brothers from different lodges. That's the only chance I've ever really had to meet Masons in different lodges. That's fair. Is when they came up for my FC and we went down for my MM. And so you guys brought up the problem is both your answers were so good that I'm basically not adding anything new to this. No. Other than like I changed my answer because your guys' answer was good. And so I would
see Jason's now already influencing for his years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sorry, 40 years early apparently.
And so and again, I'm not saying that any Grandmaster that has done a Grandmaster's class is a bad person or done the wrong thing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, like, having had my own personal experience for each degree and hearing you guys talk about how you'd wish you'd done the same thing, even though it was a good experience to go to the Master's class, like, that just makes me think, I think it'd be worth the effort and growing pains to do away with it.
Yeah, especially the MM degree. Yeah. That is one that I wish that the EA and the MM
chance for a great man.
have to be a personal experience where you are the candidate in that role. You can't watch it from the sidelines. No, and it was horrible.
Well, because I think it should be okay to say this. I think watching the MM and seeing how, because
you see all the things.
If you're participating in it and you're not seeing it, your imagination fills like. Because I realized I was picturing like where they were at in location, so I had like a visual. You guys just saw people walking around a room. It's a little bit less, you know what I mean? Like,
well, and both of those serve a function, right? By watching it as an MM, you're supposed to like get different things out of it. That's the idea. By being a part of it as a MM candidate, you get a different thing out of it, and that's the point. That's why it's done that way. And so when you just jump that step, you literally miss out on something you can never get back again. Like, it's gone forever. I'll never get that experience. It's just gone.
Which is why I think it would be worth the time and effort to put systems into place to just make sure each Mason gets his own experience.
But, that being said, right, like, at the end of the day, also, the Grandmaster's job is to make sure that lodges do work harmoniously, right? And that there is a good, and realistically, the better connection between Lodge and Grand Lodge, the better Masonry is in Utah. Like, the more support we have for each other. And so, again, if people don't like that and you just force it upon them, no one's going to follow it. And in the long term, you won't get anywhere by just forcing them to not have Grandmaster's classes, right? It has to be proven through exhaustive evidence that, like, this is better. And one of the points I think you brought up recently is, like, when we talk about this kind of in, like, moving through the chairs, like, the memorization isn't done, or, like, it's expertly done by a few people in the Grandmaster's class, the ritual at least, but it's not as well done in Lodge. And again, I think that's because of the amount of time we put in towards it. When I'm an EA, my goal isn't really to learn the EA knowledge. My goal is to memorize and move on, right? My goal is not to go through the book and understand the way things are done. It's not to go through a couple other people's EA degrees and see how it's done or participate in those EA degrees for a while. It's to memorize, move on to FC. When I'm in FC, it's to memorize, move on to MM. Okay, now learn everything to do it. When you're in MM, that's too much knowledge. Like, I made that little list of stuff of, like, what you need to memorize. It's insane.
It's so much.
Huge.
Yeah.
But
unless you'd get in it as you came through it.
But exactly, when you break it into bite-sized chunks, the stuff you need to know as an EA, totally manageable. You can totally learn that in a year as an EA. The stuff you need to learn as an FC, totally manageable. You can learn that in a year as an FC. The stuff as an MM, you have the rest of your life to work on, which is why there's so much more. But the stuff you absolutely need to know, you can learn that relatively quickly. And if a good line is in place, you'll have the time to learn that stuff by the time you are, junior warden or whatever.
You gave me an idea. This is backtracking a little bit. So what if as a happy medium has to, if a Grandmaster's class or not, like, you can still have a Grandmaster's class, but you instill the extra requirements to move on, like memorization, a time period, and proof of, like, a service project or something. And so if you have enough lodges that say, hey, our candidates have all done these things, they can move on, and there's too many amount of, then you can still do the Grandmaster's class, which takes away from the experience, but at least they've not, at least then they're not flying through it.
I think...
Would that be, like, a good, like, meet
this
halfway
may sound
thing?
like I'm backpedaling, but I'm not. Because, again, I think, like I said before, I think that the point of Freemasonry as an organization is to provide that overarching framework for how a man becomes a good man, right? The job of Freemasonry isn't to hold your hand and guide you through it. It's to show you, like, look, here are things that have, for ages and ages and ages, have shown when men exhibit these things, they're good men, right? Whether that's loyalty to your country, whether that's being nice to other people, whatever, right? That's the goal of Freemasonry, is to provide that framework, and then each person needs to walk it. So I don't actually necessarily think that it should be like you have to do a service project to show that you can move on. I think that there should be almost kind of how the Rookie Award works, where you have
that's what I mean.
things to choose from. But it should be just stuff that shows you, that should provide evidence, not to Freemasonry as a whole, but to you as an individual person, that you have learned these principles, that you are ready. Because that's a deal between your life and to whatever divine you believe in. That's not really the place of the worshipful master to decide. That's for you.
I like that. So there's still the requirements, but it can be more personal still.
Well, and you can still have the, like, you have to memorize this thing, right? Because
that'll always be.
Of course. But then you should have these other criteria and be like, hey, pick some of them.
I think that's a great idea.
It'd be nice to have, like, the equivalent of those Rookie Awards for each one. For the EA and
Let's
FC.
draft it.
We should.
Okay,
we should throw something together.
Kind of fun.
Let's finish this podcast when we're done, and let's go. What time is it?
1:28. Both me and Gary have to leave at 2.
Yeah, so we got
the latest.
So let's finish this up pretty quick, and then we can go maybe jot down some ideas.
Well, as always, we started off with a question. took a hard right turn someplace else, but it still led to a good discussion.
I love how
I enjoyed it.
I love how we were originally each going to pick a symbol, and we were going to talk about it. And I said, I'm going to ignore all of that. What about G?
What about G? So, to be fair, though, I said, well,
that's going to be my question on the phone. What about G? What about Bob? What about G?
Well, to be fair, I said, hey, I've got a couple ideas, and I presented the ideas, and then you said, that brings up a question, and then the discussion started.
So we never really
confirmed. So there wasn't, so we never said we were going to do that. I was just, we did talk a little bit about the question, but it wasn't ever actually, a solid plan made.
Okay. So now I feel like less of a jerk. And that's...
It's always
again,
about
and
Jason.
that was
that's
not... that was not the purpose. We should have kept the jerk part.
That's what I was just going to say. Since this podcast is just for me, me not feeling like a jerk, I feel like is a critical component to the success. So I'm glad we accomplished it.
You're successful this week.
Woo!
This week.
Thank you all for listening, if indeed you still are. And we will see you next week.
The hosts of the From the North podcast are providing this broadcast as a public service and for their own selfish motives. It is neither a legal interpretation nor a statement of any Grand Lodge, local lodge, or any Masonic body or Freemasonry in general. Any reference to any specific product, subject, or entity does not constitute an endorsement or any recommendation. The rantings, tomfoolery, and views expressed by the guests and the host are absolutely their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply any endorsement of them, any grand or local lodge, or any entity they represent.
Whoa.